Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our town hall meeting. I'm Paul Torkelson, State Representative for District 16B, and we're glad you're here. We're out and about today, traveling around the district. This is stop number 3 of our 5 scheduled stops for today, and we'll end in Bellevue, Minnesota, at late this afternoon, and then my wife is directing the Sunday school play, Christmas play in St. James, and she has instructed me that I'm supposed to be there. So if you know the sheriff, tell him to be someplace else besides the road between Bellevue and St. James this afternoon, and I might be all right, because I do need to show up. Anyway, thanks for being here. We are in a state of change in the Minnesota House of Representatives and in Minnesota government in general. As you all, I'm sure, know, we have a new governor coming into office. The governor-elect is in the process, as we speak, of selecting commissioners and other employees for his administration. He has not announced any of those commissioners at this point. It's something that we are all very interested in seeing who he selects, because those commissioner choices will give us an indication of just what direction the new administration will be headed as they go into this coming session. Things will be different, but we don't know exactly in what way. At the same time, in the Minnesota House, of course, you probably know that my party, the Republican Party, is no longer in the majority. We are headed for the minority, which causes a lot of changes. Number one, I'm currently chair of the House Transportation Finance Committee. That will change. I will no longer be a committee chair. They have not announced the leads. When you're in the minority, you get a ranking member of your party becomes the lead on that particular committee. I anticipate that I will continue in transportation, but the current speaker has yet to announce those leads or any of the other committee assignments, so we're waiting on that. If you're familiar with the state office building in St. Paul, where we have our House offices, you know that when the majority changes, we pretty much all move to new offices. So I'll be moving from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor, and the leadership, Republican leadership, moves from the 4th floor down to the 2nd floor, and Democrats move up to the 4th floor. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's really a kind of a structural thing because of the way the building is laid out and the fact that the majority party has a lot more staff. Those staff have to have offices, and it's most convenient if those offices are close to the leadership of the legislatures. So in a way, it makes some sense because of the physical layout of the building. And it's not all bad, because when you have to pack up your office and move, you tend to get rid of a few things. I'm sure Jeff could probably understand what that's like. And that's not all bad. I've cleaned out quite a bit of stuff in the last couple of weeks, packing up my office. So that's kind of the mechanics of where we're at right now. We're headed for the budget year coming up. It's a year, the odd-numbered years are the years when we will construct and try to pass and get signed a new budget for the next biennium. That is the heavy lifting that needs to be done. Of course, you've probably heard that we do have a surplus of approximately $1.5 billion. About $490 million of that is going into the budget reserve automatically, which is now in excess. Our budget reserves will be in excess of $2 billion, which sounds like an awful lot of money. But I think back to get the year right, 2013, I believe it was, when we had a 16, that wasn't quite that bad, $6 billion deficit. So $2 billion can disappear in a big hurry. There's, of course, anytime you have a surplus, there's a long list of folks that think that their priority area is the most important. So there are lots of requests for additional spending. The truth is, a lot of that will be eaten up just by the fact that there's a certain amount of growth built into the budget. And as we look ahead to the the second biennium out, the forecast is not nearly so rosy. So I think it means we should be very cautious with how we address the potential for additional spending. With that, I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Gary Dahms. The senator has been a great partner to work with, and I appreciate the fact that we can work as a team. It's very helpful, and he'll give you some more details on what's going on in the Senate and what's coming up. I understand that they have made their one-vote majority official again because former House member Jeff Howe got sworn in yesterday to the Minnesota Senate.
Well, thank you, Paul, and it's been a privilege for me to work with Paul for the last 8 years. We work very well together, and we work on a lot of bills together in session, so I look forward to that continuing. With that said, as Paul alluded to, the Senate's been with no majority since June of 2018 when Senator Fischbach resigned and became the lieutenant governor on a full-time basis. So that left her seat open, and so there was a special election which was held the same time the general election was. And we did keep the seat, so now, as of yesterday, we have the majority back in Republican hands in the Senate. So our committees and everything will pretty much stay the same. We did a little transitioning on a few of the committees. We put policy and finance and education, we put that together in one committee instead of having that broke up. And then we had to make some changes because we now have a new president. So, and Michelle Fischbach was our chair of the finance, or the higher ed, so we did have to make a change there. But other than that, we've pretty much maintained the same. I chaired the Commerce Committee the last 2 years, and I'll continue to chair that for the next 2 years. Commerce handles the banking, the insurance, financial services, securities, and also the alcohol part of it. So it's a very interesting committee, and we're usually fairly busy. With that said, I'd just like to talk to some of the things that we look forward to having coming up this year. One of them will be tax conformity. We had a tax conformity portion in the tax bill last year, and that did get vetoed by Governor Dayton. So the tax conformity to conform with the federal tax will be back on the plate this year to get that done. It appears that that'll probably be done for 2019. It's going to be pretty hard to get anything done and make it official for 2018. So we'll be working on that, trying to get it to 2019. Hopefully we can get that done early enough in session so people can do their 2019 tax planning when it comes to trading equipment, stuff like that for the Section 179. So we'll be looking at that real close. Some of the other issues certainly deal with mental health, elderly care, opioids, child care, and we've had some task force dealings with opioids and with child care around the state this year. In fact, the last task force meeting for child care was held Monday night up in Hibbing. Also, we've got the health care issues to deal with. Again, we did reinsurance 2 years ago. That'll cover through 1919, so we have to decide what we're going to do for 2020. Are we going to continue with reinsurance? Are we going to have a blend of reinsurance and tax credits, or just go to tax credits? We're not sure just where that'll go at this point, but we'll be looking at that. School safety will be an issue again. Education, transportation, and distracted driving is certainly getting very high on the list of something we're going to have to do and deal with. So with that said, wish everybody a happy holiday, and thank you for being here, and we'll open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
Gary, go back for a second to the tax and
Yes.
issue. When feds did the federal change effective for the year of 18,
Correct.
they didn't really pass that until I think sometime in January, later January of 18, but they made it retroactive for the full year. Is there no way that Minnesota could do the same?
Well,
Backdated enough at this point to make it for 18?
we would have to backdate it probably 13, 14 months, and so that would be pretty tough. The problem we have is that the Revenue Service cannot get everything changed over. We could pass a conformity bill and get that passed out. We could do that the first week or so if we could get together and get it done. But the federal or the state revenue cannot make all the changes and get everything done, get it out to the public, and still have them file their taxes and have things done by the middle of April. Now, we could do some extensions, but if we were to make it work, we very likely would have people not getting their tax refunds until sometime in October or November. And so that puts, a lot of people depend on those tax refunds, and so that puts them in a real tough position. So it just doesn't seem right now that it's going to be very feasible to get that done. I was hoping it would be, but it will be, so we'll probably pass it out sometime February or March, hopefully, and then that'll give people that information for 19.
That makes sense, and that department of the state really seems like one of the more efficient ones.
Yes.
So that's probably, is it a very controversial issue between the two parties?
Well, yes. What happened last year is that we had agreement, it's like a $454 million benefit to the state by not doing anything. And so we had an agreement last year, we're going to try to have a net zero impact. So like Section 179, that's $100 and some million. And then we had other pieces of it that come up that's $454 million. Well, the agreement, we thought we had an agreement that like Section 179 would be held to zero. Well, at the end of the day, as we got more into the agreements, it started to change to where we want to bring the 450 in, but then we're going to distribute different than where it came from. So the Section 179, that was going to be left in place, so you would continue to pay that tax, but it would be put someplace else. So that's where the breakdown came.
The lack of conformity and the 450 that you're referring to, is that part of the contribution to the projected surplus?
My assumption is that it would be in there, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. There has been a change, though. The Department of Revenue during last session was saying that if you use the standard deduction at the federal level, you'd have to use the standard deduction at the state level also. Since session was over, they've changed that so that you can do one of each. And that's going to actually save a number of folks quite a bit of tax money. So the impact to the budget isn't as dramatic as that 450 that Gary mentioned. It's something less than that. I don't think they've even actually given us a number, but because of that change, it's going to be a little easier for folks to, save some money on taxes. The problem is it's going to make their tax returns more complicated. And so the time it takes and the expense of paying somebody to pay your taxes is probably going to go up as a result of this lack of action. Gary said that maybe we could do something quickly. On the House side, we've got, I believe, 34 new members out of our 134 member bodies. So we've got about a fourth of the House are brand new people that have never voted on a tax bill, and they're going to want to understand what they're voting on before we vote on something that significant. So that's another reason why it just isn't going to happen that quickly.
Whatever the windfall is, whether it's 450 or turns out to be less, in either case, it'd be a shame to have that drop into the new spending program when it's a one-shot deal.
Right.
I absolutely agree with you, Mark.
I think it would be good this year if we could, instead of introducing new programs, if we're going to do anything new, do it at one-time spending. It's easier to control one-time spending than it is. Once you put a program in place, it's really hard to take it back off the table, very hard. Yeah. Other questions? Yes?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to both of you. You have done a wonderful job. And Paul, thank you for all the hours that you've dedicated to working with us. And Gary, thank you for all the help and the help too from your elder when it's been a godsend.
Thank you.
Now, what is the issue with the omnibus bills? Is that something that the Democrats are trying to change, that don't have omnibus bills?
Most of the conversation has been surrounding the omnibus bill, the extra large bill that has gotten to be kind of a bad habit, in my opinion, of the legislature. And it hasn't been just the Republicans or just the Democrats, but over the last few bienniums, not every biennium, but more often than not, especially in the second year, there's been this tendency to throw everything into one lot of legislation into one large bill. And it's done for a variety of reasons, strategic reasons that I don't think are all that valid. I hope that we will abandon that. I don't think it's helpful. And this year was a good example of a lot of good ideas that were in that bill that Governor Dayton just didn't feel he could sign the whole bill. And there wasn't time to do anything to recover from that.
Now, he vetoed everything, correctly?
He vetoed the what we call Optimus Prime, or there's got a variety of nicknames at the end of session, and rightly, you know, on the other hand, we can't vote on every single issue that comes forward. I mean, there's got to be some consolidation of things within departments, or we would get bogged down with just too many votes and we wouldn't have enough floor time to accommodate everything. So it's challenging, but I think there's kind of general agreement that hopefully we've seen the last of those extra large omnibus bills.
I would agree with Paul that I think there's been an agreement that we will try to stay away from those multiple committee omnibus bills. You know, I think we're still going to have omnibus bills, but at least we need to keep them to a committee or a subject. So education should have its own omnibus bill. Agriculture should have its own omnibus bill. Go right down the line by the committees and have our own omnibus bills for each one of those. The question becomes, do we do a policy omnibus bill and a finance omnibus bill? Some of the larger committees like Health and Human Services, Education, Higher Education, that's probably feasible there. Some of the smaller ones we can probably do a combination. But I think we'll see a change on that. Yeah, I think there's pretty much general agreement that we need to do that. Yep.
No, very particularly in the Senate.
Yes.
I know that some of the bills the Senate passed, but were not addressed in committee in the House.
Yes.
Were in that omnibus bill. Now, my understanding is that they will have to come back to the Senate again to go through the whole process. Would that be correct?
Yes, because last year was the second year of the biennium. A bill, when you introduce a bill, it's good for a biennium, which is a 2-year period. So any bills that didn't come through the last year, they have to be redrafted and reintroduced this session now, and then they'll be good for, if they don't pass, they'll be good for 2 sessions. Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
and thank you very much for that. And as I mentioned to Paul, we will be asking for both of your guidance and help again this session as in the past, and appreciate everything that you have done. And my mother says the same Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Yep,
you.
same to you. Yep. Other questions? Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that there's 7 states out of 50 that we have to pay income tax on our social security, and Minnesota is one of them. Am I correct or not?
I believe you are correct.
You are correct,
I'm
yes.
not absolutely sure of that number, but it's a small one.
Senator Dahms, I've talked to you on
Mhm.
the phone, you've returned my call, and I appreciate that
Yep.
very much. And I think something needs to be done. How often do we have to pay income tax on that same dollar?
What we've done is, there is a standard exclusion, depending on your income and stuff, there is a standard exclusion on tax on Social Security, but once you pass that threshold, then you get taxed. So that was increased a couple of years ago. So the tax on Social Security isn't as high as what it was, but the higher income earners are still paying that tax. So we're trying to get that so that there will be no tax on Social Security. And that's one of the things that we'll be working on to get in the tax bill this year. There gets to be a lot of pushback, but we'll continue to strive to work on that. We have made some strides on it in the last couple of years, and we'll continue to, because I tend to agree with you. I mean, you're paying tax on that when it's taken out, so why retax it?
And the
Yep.
House Republicans also feel the same way, that we should not be taxing Social Security benefits. But there is a tax there, and getting rid of it is no small task. And again, depending on what the new governor decides are his priorities, we'll see how that all, I'm afraid so.
On this subject,
Yeah.
have they looked at how many people are leaving Minnesota to go to low tax states and register in South Dakota or Texas?
Well, we
Florida?
certainly know that a certain amount of that goes on, because we all, I think many of us
We know people.
know of individuals that have done that from either Florida or Texas or elsewhere. The department claims that the numbers are not that significant, that there's not that much out migration. We talked about this yesterday in the Ways and Means hearing that we had. And it's hard to pin those kind of statistics down because they aren't tracked accurately in a reportable form.
I think it's interesting, the number of calls I still get from CPAs, public accountants, that are still having, their clients are still moving. I mean, I just had a call the other day from the CPA, and he had some people that were making the change, just recently made the change to another state for tax purposes. So it's, that migration's still going on, and it does shift the dollars. I mean, these people that are moving, they're pretty big taxpayers.
The big taxpayers are leaving and social service people are moving in.
The other problem we have is that a lot of these bigger taxpayers are also very benevolent in giving funds to foundations and stuff like that. So when they leave, a lot of times that stops, so, which is unfortunate. Yep. Other questions, concerns? Yes, sir.
Does the new governor listen as much as he talks?
We don't know yet. To be very honest, I've known Tim Walt since he first ran for Congress some 12 years ago. I was very active in Minnesota Farm Bureau at the time and met with him a number of times during his tenure in the U.S. Congress. And he does listen too. He's a good talker, but he also listens. The question now, of course, will be what kind of actions does he take based on the results of this election. So we'll see.
One of his campaign slogans was "One Minnesota." And I think it'd be very interesting to see how serious we are with one Minnesota. Right now, there's a lot of contrast between, a lot of differences between rural and metro, and what the needs are and what the funding and things like that are. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think the telltale part of that will be in the appointments to the administration, the appointments to the committee, to the commissioners. I think that'll be somewhat of an indication as to how much of a one Minnesota we're going to have. If we have some rural people filling some of these commission positions, that would be good. We need that. We've encouraged him, from the Senate side, we've encouraged Tim and his team to look at more moderate commissioners so that it's people that both sides can work with, and hopefully we see some of that. But we'll see what happens. I think they're supposed to start announcing some of these commissionerships here next week, so we'll see what happens into where the commissioners are coming from and what their backgrounds are. Yes, sir.
I know you don't represent Nicklaus County, but most of us over there like you guys anyway. And how do I phrase it? We just added 4 positions in social services.
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand it right, over the last 5 years, Nicklaus County has added like 16 positions, and all but 2 have been in social services, which our administrator says is pretty much stuff required from the state. So where does those rules or that push come from? Is that from legislature? Is that from the governor? Is that from a certain health and human services bureaucracy?
Well, it can come from a couple of places. It could come through the legislature with a mandate, or in many cases, it comes through rulemaking authority by the agency. And that's where an awful lot of that comes from.
We've seen tremendous growth in those numbers during the Dayton administration. And I would agree with Gary that much of that growth is driven by the administration, but part of it also comes from the federal government and their requirements for how we address various social issues.
Greg?
On that same manner, any ideas on how the Walsh administration will treat other rules and regulations having to do, say, with agriculture or environment? So this, a lot of times it's the rules that are more important than the legislation.
Well, you're right about that. Rulemaking has significant impact on a variety of industries across the state. We really don't know at this time. I'm choosing to be optimistic. Waltz's roots are here in greater Minnesota, and so hopefully he has a better understanding of what we're up against and how much impact some of these rules have on what we do. And I would hope that his understanding would lead to agencies that actually help people get things done rather than try to stop them from getting things done. But we'll see. We don't know.
Yes, sir.
Do either of you have any sense for whether Walsh will be actively supportive on completing Highway 14 from Midland to New Ulm?
I don't think he's made any statements in those regards. He has talked quite a bit about transportation spending. So I believe that transportation will be a priority for him. How those funds are allocated, of course, is always challenging and controversial. I'm reasonably optimistic that we're headed in the right direction, given that we've got the highway completed to Nicollet, and with the Gateway project going on right outside of town here, we'll have kind of the two ends in place, and then it's a matter of just filling in the middle. Should give us some added leverage on fund allocations.
I think we're going to know a lot more about how he's going to handle the process and where he's going to stand on issues when he releases his first budget. Because that's going to give us pretty good indication, comes to transportation, of what he's choosing for transportation dollars, but not only the number of dollars he's choosing, but where he specifically is looking at. If he starts targeting areas and stuff like that, that'll give us a pretty good indication. Kind of the same way with the one Minnesota, looking at how he does his commissioners. I think there will be a lot of telltales in how he does his budget as to what kind of expectations we can have. But I think getting the piece done that we did last year on Highway 14 between Mankato and Rochester, I think that's going to be a big help now to get the attention moved over to Nicollet to New Ulm. And like Paul alluded to, having both ends done, I think gives us a leg up to get the balance done. Yep. Greg?
I'm kind of surprised he hasn't named commissioners because they would have to come up with budgets for their departments, and isn't that proposed to the legislature in the middle of January?
Yeah, I think it's the end of January, I'm not just sure. But remember, though, that the same the previous administration was also DFL, and so they can be doing a lot of that work in these budgets also. So I'm sure that they're doing a lot of work on these budgets, and then the new commission will come in and take a look at them along. And a lot of the people that would help put those budgets together will still be there. So I think that gives him a little advantage there. But you're right. I mean, it's the new regime that will put together the budget. But I'm sure they're already working on that.
Gary's right. Various departments are working on suggested budgets for the new administration, and the transition team, to a certain degree, is working on that too. And you have to remember, it's just a proposed budget. It's not the final budget. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, sir.
Question for both of you. Supposedly, we have a $1.5 billion budget.
Mm-hmm.
What is your opinion, or
Surplus.
Surplus.
Surplus, excuse me. Well, what is both of your opinion on the new governor's idea of raising the gas tax?
Well, I'm personally opposed to that. I don't think it's necessary in times of budget surplus. And I think we proved that in the last biennium when we passed a transportation bill that had the most transportation spending ever in a bill that did not raise the gas tax. You know, transportation is one of two core items that are in the Constitution, that we fund education and transportation. There's no reason why we should have to raise gas taxes when we have a surplus. And if you look at our gas tax amounts, and I've got the details here, I won't bore you with them, but our gas tax is pretty much on par with our neighbors right now. We're higher than South Dakota, we're a penny or two lower than Wisconsin and Iowa, we're about the same as South Dakota, and that's kind of where we want to be. If we raise our gas taxes a lot higher than our neighbors, folks that have businesses on the border are going to suffer. They won't be able to sell gas because people will go across the border to get their gas. So I think we want to keep an eye on that, keep things in balance.
One of the problems with the gas tax is that when it first starts out, it brings in the money predicted, but then it just goes in a downward growth. It just does not grow, it goes downward because you've got more efficient cars coming every year, you've got more electric cars coming every year, and you've got the newer, younger generation. A lot of those people are not driving. A lot of those people are using mass transit, especially in the inner city and stuff like that. So what happens then is that tax goes down, and pretty soon you're back trying to pass another gas tax. In the last one I think we had was in 2000, I believe in 2008. And that I think went into effect like in August of 2008. And I was a county commissioner. I came in 2009, and so one of the committees I was on was one of the transportation committees. The gas tax came in August of 2008, and in March of 2009, that organization was asking to start in working on a new gas tax because the old one, the one they passed in August, wasn't going to keep up. So if we don't want to continually keep asking for gas tax increases and having that discussion, we need to go to something that's more stable. And I think that taking the sales tax from the tires, the batteries that were sold and things like that, the repairs, automobile repairs, and putting that in the transportation fund, which we did last year, and I think that's was in play for the last biennium. And that made a major difference. And everybody said the sky was falling when we did that, because you can't do that because you're going to be taking all this money away from other people. We moved that money to transportation, and we still have a $1.5 billion surplus. Now that $1.5 billion, $490 million of that will be put in the rainy day fund. So we'll still be a little over $1 billion that we will have in the surplus. So I like that method of doing it because that is on pretty much a constant growth plane all the time. And so every year it's going to put more money into transportation. And, you know, we go to a lot of meetings, and one of the big concerns is transportation. But at the end of the day, when we start prioritizing where the money's going to go, and a couple of times we've sent out and asked people where they'd like the money spent. You rank them 1 to 5. And transportation usually always come in lower because everybody wants to take care of the nursing homes, and understandable. People want to take care of education, understandable. And the other things kind of pushes transportation, so it's always kind of the weak one on the bottom. So we have to come up with a way of funding that, and I think that was a good way to do it, and I hope we can continue to do that. Other questions?
Mark,
Paul, did you want to comment?
No.
Mark, you said that the governor's appointments here might be the first indicator of how partisan we might expect it to be. Any idea whether there'll be any change in the DNR? I thought that was the most arrogant. This whole Fort Ridgely thing, their arrogance was just appalling.
Well, we can hope for change. I don't, there's lots of rumors circulating around the Capitol right now as these commissioner appointments are about to be made. The last word I heard was that Tom Landwehr was not coming back as DNR commissioner. So it's also a rumor or an idea floating around that the governor will appoint 2 or even 3 Republicans as commissioners. We'll see if that actually happens. It's a lot easier to talk about than it is to do as governor.
Other questions? Yes?
Connie?
I know Paul and I already talked about this, but Gary, I guess the question is primarily for you. When is a good time to
Yes, yes. My suggestion would be from Senate standpoint, after the holidays, then start, a lot of people, a lot of the senators are not in on a daily basis before session starts. So if you start in making inquiries after the holidays, then we're ready, we're into our January calendar and we'll start putting people, start plugging in for, because session's on the 8th. And so
Right.
we'll probably start plugging in meetings, the following Monday, likely, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
so would it make sense then to do it after the 8th of January or part of that one?
I would just wait until after the holidays, after the new year, then, because the calendars will be ready and people will be, then the committee structure has already been announced as far as the times, so our LAs will have, CLAs will have, they'll know what times we have to be blocked off for committee and different things like that, so then it becomes pretty clear, our calendar's pretty cleared up so that we can start, they can start making appointments for us, yeah.
Will the committees in the Senate be running the same days and the same time?
There could be a little structural change, not just sure, but I think there'll be some changes because of a combination of putting the policy and the finance on education together. So that'll change that, and I think we'll probably have a Monday, Wednesday, but that's not certain yet. That would be different from last year. And there'll be a couple other ones that may change times a little bit, but that'll be announced probably before Christmas. Yep. So they'll know that information. Once the holidays are over, they'll know all that information, yes.
Okay, and then all, would that be the same for youth and how?
Right. They have not even finalized our committee schedule and structure yet. They've got a tentative one out there. The number of committees is increasing by a fairly substantial number. That's not unusual when the DFL takes control, that they increase the number of committees. They are still trying to keep to a schedule that is Monday through Thursday, so there will not be scheduled committee meetings on Fridays, and we're thankful for that, because for a while there's a rumor that they might schedule committees on Fridays. They haven't done that, at least at this point. But that should all be solidifying soon. I don't even know at this point which committees I'll be on, so it's yet to be determined.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Hi.
I would once again request that we consider holding these meetings during evenings or Saturdays. As you can see, we only have 12 people present here today, and very, very short on number is would really appreciate it if working people were given the opportunity to attend these meetings as well. I know I'm a retired teacher, and if I was not retired, there would have been zero possibility for me to present.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. We appreciate your input.
Bring a class along.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And that would require a school bus, which is extraordinarily expensive.
This, of course, isn't the only way we communicate with folks, but we understand your concerns about that. It's a challenge, of course, to get everything in.
Other questions, concerns?
I think we've drained them dry. Gary.
Yep, we have, yes.
Thank you for the ag credit on the building referendum.
Yep.
I wish it would have been more, but a lot better than nothing.
Yeah.
No, it was a bit of relief for property taxpayers.
Yeah.
And the good thing about that is it's relief that came from the state, so it doesn't just push that burden off onto other property taxpayers within your taxing district. It's real relief, I would say, for the district in general. So, yeah, we're happy that happened. There's potentially more work to be done there. We'll see what
Well,
kind of
initially it was
proposals.
gonna be 50%, then it switched to 40.
Right.
Right, yeah,
Because,
yeah.
that was the compromise at the time, yeah.
I think there's a good example of people working together in cooperation. We had a lot of support from the city and suburban legislators to do this, both support on both the Republican and Democrat side, both outer state and in-state, so in the Twin Cities. So it was a good bill that we had a lot of good support on, and it was really good to see it come together with support from the Twin City folks to make it happen. because without some of those votes, we could have never got that done, so it was good to see that, yep.
Very good. Well, thanks again for coming out. You're welcome to come to the Capitol, schedule a time whenever you're going to be in St. Paul. And I'll just remind you again that the Capitol is looking great after the remodeling project. If you haven't been up there to see it since we finished that, it's an amazing facility and a building that we should all be proud of. And I encourage you to come up and take a tour. It's really, really, really nice. With that, happy holidays to everyone. I hope you have a great holiday, and I'm sure Gary wants to say a few words before we break
And
up.
thank you folks for coming, we certainly do appreciate it, and we value your opinion, your comments, and your concerns, and I hope that everybody has a happy holiday. So thank you folks, and if you need to get a hold of us, always get a hold of us at the Capitol. Yep, thank you
Merry
folks.
Christmas. Thank you.